Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. Yes, I'm wearing the Star Wars shirt today, and I've got out the Black Falcon pipe, which, if you've watched this channel before, you know I tend to bring this guy out when we're talking about technological or space-related things, and that's exactly what we're talking about in this episode. As always, let's get this guy lit. Let's get to talking. I said a while back I was going to do several episodes on some of my favorite superhero comic books. Already done one on The Flash. Getting ready to talk about another one today. Now, I imagine that a number of people had heard of The Flash. This one, maybe not so much. But boy, he was one of my favorites back in the day. From the late 70s, about late 79 to mid 80s, Marvel Comics had a superhero named ROM. R-O-M. ROM-Spaceknight. I remember getting the very first issue of this. And I honestly don't remember if my mom brought it home just for me from the grocery store. She had bought it, or if I bought it, or what. I don't remember that. But I do remember owning the original. I no longer have that, sadly. And right away, fell in love with it. Started buying every issue, and it was one of the ones that I subscribed to back in the days when you could subscribe to comic books. The Flash was one I subscribed to. ROM was another I subscribed to, and we'll hold the others off for another day. Originally, ROM was designed as a toy. Then, I think by Hasbro, and then Marvel picked up the rights to it, turned it into a comic book. There was a toy. I got the toy. The basic plot was that there was this planet called Galador, and to protect, I don't know, just Galador or all of space, I can't quite remember. The Galadorians formed this space army of space knights. Now, these were really cyborgs. They were humans, or human beings, that were grafted into this robotic armor. And so the human being and the armor became one, and you really couldn't separate them. So it wasn't like you put the armor on and took it off. Nor were these creatures just robots. So they were fully integrated human and machine. The main bad guys that they fought were these somewhat ethereal sorts of beings called the Dire Wraiths. W-R-A-I-T-H. The Dire Wraiths. And the problem with the Dire Wraiths was that they were shapeshifters. So they could adopt any appearance that they wanted to. So people would know that there were Dire Wraiths around. Well, ROM somehow ended up coming to Earth, alone of all the space knights. Landed in West Virginia. Well, I'm remembering the first page of that first issue correctly. He lands in the middle of a road, and there's this woman named Brandy who's driving, and she careens off the road because there's this giant, what she thinks is a robot, standing in the middle of the road. And I remember something, the opening text says something like, he stared into the headlights, that were pale to one who had seen into the very heart of stars. Something like that, right? A really dramatic opening, right? And ROM, he could cause his weapons to materialize from, I don't know if they call it subspace or something like that. And he didn't necessarily carry his weapons with him, but he could cause them to materialize when he needed them. And one of his devices he could use to scan any living creature and tell, is it an actual human, animal, whatever, or is it a dire wraith in disguise? And then he would materialize another weapon, and if it's a dire wraith, he would shoot this thing, and it would banish the dire wraith to a realm called limbo. Now, the problem was, when he banished one of these dire wraiths, what was left was a heap of ash that had once been the human form. Now, it wasn't that they took over actual human beings, but they took on human form, or animals, I think. And anyhow, that shape just was reduced to ash. Well, while Rom was doing a good thing, he was banishing these creatures to limbo. To the eyes of humans, it looked as if this alien robot was murdering people, because all they saw was a human being, this alien shooting a laser at it, and next thing you know, there's a heap of ash. So Rom gets pegged as a bad guy by the local police and military and all this kind of stuff. Not unlike if you think about Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man often seemed to run afoul of the law. And even sometimes Batman did, and I think some of the others, and this is kind of a recurring theme, right? Is the good guy really good, or seems bad? So you have that theme kind of running through there. Now, there's another aspect of this I'm going to come to that may surprise you that this was even in comics, or that I was thinking this way. But I loved it, man. He wasn't actually killing people, but he was dispensing with the bad guys. He looked cool. Now, I will say the toy was fun, but the toy was very straight up and down the arms and so forth. Well, Rom himself in the comic book, he was kind of muscular armor and so forth, and looked really, really, really cool. Once this woman Brandy, though, that nearly ran into him on the road when he first arrived to Earth, she comes to find out who he really is, and then she goes along and starts helping him, and then of course there's damsel in distress storylines and all this kind of stuff. But as I said in my episode about the Flash, I love that the Flash was actually married, or Barry Allen. The Barry Allen Flash was actually married. I have always been a romantic at heart. I started my first music that I listened to, kind of my own, outside of church music, was country music. Lots of love songs, love ballads, and this was an age when, I'm starting to kind of come into that part of my personality. And so there was a love story between Rom and Brandy. And even though Rom is a real person inside the armor, right, he could never really express himself because he was fused with the armor. And if I'm remembering correctly, there were some episodes, later issues. I think at one time Rom and Brandy end up back on planet Galador, and I think somehow or another Rom does get separated from his armor, but then I think Brandy takes on armor at some point, and so there's this on again, off again, can they get together kind of love thing. And I loved that. I really did. I was a romantic at heart, even as a young guy. And so I loved the love story aspect of ROM, the Space Knight, along with all the intergalactic daring do as ROM fought the dire wraiths. So, very curious on this one. Had you ever heard of ROM, the Space Knight? Now, obviously, I've been showing some pictures here in the video. Does that look familiar to you? Had you ever seen ROM? Did you ever read ROM? Did you like ROM? If you did, what do you know about ROM Space Knight? So, friends, the slightly spacey looking, I don't know, to me anyhow, black Falcon seemed to be appropriate for that. The Star Wars shirt as well. Wish I still had that comic. I'd probably go back in and read it right now, but I don't. So, as Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I say in Latin, Parva ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.